Hey everybody, Kevin Shortell here once again with another episode of the Real Estate Without Renters podcast. Thank you as always for listening to the program, and please go ahead and subscribe. And I really would appreciate that. If you enjoy the show, which I truly hope that you do, please give it a nice rating there. That does help overall because we want to bring you more and more episodes. And as I mentioned on the last one, we have a special series involved right now, which is dealing with the overall economic situation that we are all facing, potentially facing, and there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace, a lot of, I wouldn't say panic just yet, but there's a lot of eyeballs going, what is happening right now? So I've spoken with my friend and colleague, Dave Frenicky, and he's on here as well, and we'll be getting him involved in this series from the get-go. And that's what we're going to put together for you all. Before we get started on that, I do want to thank my sponsors once again, Noteworthy. That's noteworthyusa.com. You can check that out. The new newsletter should be coming out this month, and I'm featured on the cover. So stay tuned on the YouTube channel where we're also posting this podcast now, at least for the special series. I'll have a link on there where you can get a free copy of that newsletter when it comes out, which should be pretty soon, probably right after the national holiday coming up. But we also have a convention. So the Noteworthy National Convention is coming up in September. It's going to be September 22nd and 23rd, and that's an industry-wide event for people interested in investing in notes and learning more and networking, because there'll be several speakers that are going to be there over the two-day event, and also for seasoned people who have been there that are looking to up their game and also network and share ideas and deals and everything else. And there'll be more information about that national convention, which is here in Orlando, Florida, by the way, on the website, which is noteworthyusa.com. All right. Also, my book, for those of you who don't have my book yet, Real Estate Without Renters, same name as the podcast. You can get that on Amazon. All you have to do on Amazon is search for Real Estate Without Renters, or simply my name, kevinshortell.com, and you can pick that book up right there, and they'll ship it out to you. All right. Dave, my friend, how are you?
I'm doing well, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you. So just refresh people a little bit about you and us and how we've decided to put this together.
You and I came together for this because of what we saw happening in the economy and how we could potentially help other folks. Generically, I've been in this game for a long time, going back to the late 70s, and of course, building, developing, whatever. I went to a real estate event last night here in Phoenix, and what I found is that we're on track. A lot of people are still in disbelief of what's going on. Mm-hmm. They haven't really come to terms with it. They know it's there. So I think I know we're on the cutting edge of what is going to be happening. And we can help a lot of people using our experience as a step ladder for them to get to where they want to go.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And I know you've done a lot of research on this and really in general, reading every single day on this topic as I have also to put this together, because we do want to have current information. We do want to verify the statistics and everything that we talk about. And also we want to make sure that it's related, all of this information related back for 90% of the time to real estate and real estate notes. But we also want to show you through that same experience of how you can preserve what you have, how you can continue to grow through this inflationary period, possible recession, stagflation, and all the other verbiage that's pretty much everywhere in the news right now. So to catch everyone up, in the last episode, we talked about inflation. And we've got some more things to talk about on inflation, and we were going through how it will affect your borrowers. And we talked about the fact that as the cost of consumer goods continue to go up, obviously at some point in time, that will affect whether people have the ability to make their payments or not. So if you own real estate as a landlord, you're potentially going to be affected there. If you own a note, that is backed by that real estate and people are paying the mortgage payments to you, that once again could affect you as the cost of consumer goods continues to go up. So if you haven't listened to that episode and you jumped ahead of this one, you may want to go back and take a quick listen on that one to get caught up on that. So we're going to advance that conversation that we had on the last one to today, which is merging this into a little bit more about the recession and how that can be really one of the greatest opportunities to create wealth. So let's start then back up on inflation. And Dave, I did a little more digging into today, just, to define it for everybody. And I have to admit, I was a little bit surprised by just going to the Federal Reserve. And you can see on the top there, the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve, right on their website. And everybody, you can Google search it if you want to, the definition of inflation according to the Federal Reserve. And I was amazed how wishy-washy it is. I mean, it just really, inflation occurs when price of goods increase over time. I mean, it's very vague. And the vagueness continues on the measuring of what that number is. I know you've done some further research on that. So what's your insight on that? Where are we?
Kevin, that depends. It's the typical legal answer. Nobody wants to give an answer in terms of what it is. It depends on what spin they want at any given time. But it's there. It's real. People are getting hurt by it. As I mentioned on our pre-call meeting, I was at an event last night here in Phoenix, and they were talking about how this inflation is going to impact borrowers. So here we are in the note business. Now, they were talking about traditional lending, but here we are in the note business. We work with borrowers, and there's a lot of loans that are not being approved because the lenders have added one more filter. Can you guess what that is, Kevin, as it relates to it's a little plastic card, maybe? They're looking at the debt that folks are picking up on credit cards.
Yeah.
Why are they looking at that? Because people can't afford, or their lifestyle is being impacted by inflation as it relates to the gas, the food, and whatever. And now the free money has left the stage, and people are using plastic. And the plastic debt is going up over the chart. That is a weak block in the foundation. I think that's a long answer to answer your short question.
You bring up a great point, and I should have put a slide on that. By the way, for those who are listening to the podcast, if you want to see these slides and everything, just pop over to YouTube. You can join my channel over there. Just type in my name, Kevin Shortell, and everything will be posted for you right there. But we'll do our best to describe these charts. We're looking, as I said, at the definition here of inflation according to the Federal Reserve. But you bring up a great point, and I probably in hindsight should have had a slide for that, because you're right. I have seen the data, and maybe you sent me a slide and that's why I've seen it. But
I did not send you a slide. This was just new from last night, because I was sitting right next to the title lady.
Yeah.
And I got some great insight on where the economy is, and what's going on. And people walking from deals and things like that because of they're anticipating price point fallout.
Yeah. And I've said, and even on my tip of the days and everything else, I said, one of the things I look at is credit card debt. And because that's typically the first one that starts to go unpaid. And if we back it up further, as things get more expensive, and certainly this has happened because the charts and graphs that I've seen 100% support this, where credit card debt all of a sudden just started going up. It got very low over the years, and then all of a sudden it started spiking up again. And it kind of tells you, well, people are struggling a little bit, so they're putting it on plastic. And then you're right, the debt to income ratio that all lenders look at, and certainly the Dodd-Frank Act makes them measure that rate and keep it under a certain cap to be a so-called qualified loan. Of course, we have non-qualified, different story, but they have to be sensitive to that. So I can imagine if inflation, is up and people are using more plastic, and of course the mortgage interest rates are up, the monthly payments are going to be up, the debt to income ratio is just going to, delay certainly people who want to buy houses right now. There's no question about it.
Kevin, there's one other point. I was at the car repair place a couple days ago. And I asked the manager, who I've known for 15 years, how's business? He said, it's the best it's ever been. And I said, why? Because people cannot get cars. They can't afford cars. So they're fixing their car up. Now, if they don't have the cash flow, how are they going to pay for that?
Mm-hmm.
Credit card again. So it's all these different building blocks that are either falling apart or they're being built on, compounding we're heading for a train wreck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not, panic time yet, but boy, look at the signs, everybody. And I think I mentioned this on the previous podcast, but I'll mention again for emphasis here. I had a part ownership in a mortgage company before the last crash in 2008. And I should have seen the signs. I should have recognized that more because it certainly was there. I wasn't in the office every day, as they say, but I would look and see some of these loans that we were doing, and it was just nuts. But we had to do them. In a case like this, the loans are more strict, but it's been quite a while since we've had inflation like this. In fact, the next chart that I have here really shows that growth. And this is the very latest data, by the way, which will not include June yet, that they look at that in July. But you can see just over 2021 and 2022, we went from what looks like a pretty stable since 2012, about 1.67% inflation rate, to all of a sudden 2021, and these are all year over year measurements, because that's again what the Fed looks at as more of a longer term, not month to month. So 7% inflation in 2021, and now we're looking at 8.6 in 2022. And again, that's not really the full measurement of how much things have gone up. It's across the board on a multiple of things. So certainly we're seeing spikes in other areas, such as energy costs, right?
Right. Correct. So it's all coming together. One other point, Kevin, I know, because we're always looking for the solution. I mean, that was one of our overlying benchmarks that you and I wanted to hit in this podcast series, is how can you preserve and make money? Mm-hmm. So again, last night at the Phoenix Real Estate Club meeting, there were maybe 75 to 100 people there. I looked around, I hadn't been there for a few years. There were only 4 or 5 people that I knew, but the people that stood up, many of them had been in the business years ago, and the quote unquote, now they're smelling blood in the water or opportunity. Mm-hmm. So now is the time where if you set yourself up in the note business with seller finance or whatever it might be, you're going to make a lot of hay.
Yeah, exactly. So your competitive rates, I mean, essentially what this is saying, another way to look at it is if you keep your money in cash, the purchasing power is going down 8.6%. So you're losing money just holding on to cash. Now, we spoke about cash and why that may be important to keep the so-called some of your powder dry for the eventuality where the market's going to go through a major adjustment. You want to be able to deploy some of that, but certainly keeping some investments obviously active, that is a good thing, because in the note space, what I think is going to happen with seller finance notes, which is one of the many sources of notes that we buy as note investors, the seller finance notes are typically written at about 8 to 10% interest across the board. And I think, Dave, you've seen that same thing too. Right. Yeah. Once bank rates start to approach that number, inevitably it's going to push up the seller finance rate, because the thought process is, look, if you can get a bank loan, get a bank loan, but you're coming to us or you're buying a house and you don't have the ability to go to bank because you're not qualified for those numbers. So we're taking on additional risk. So why would we charge bank rates? So I do think we're going to see an increase in the interest rate on those seller finance loans, which again will keep us above that inflationary number, at least for now. So I think that's a good place. And I don't know where else. I mean, when you think about it, where else can you get a, let's say, 10% secured return right now? Secured, by something that's worth maybe twice as much as you have money in it. Where else can you go?
It's limited. It's just not there. And just by the way that the real estate valuations are going up like crazy, if you buy right and if you use the proper due diligence in the event of stuff hitting the fan, again, if you've done it right with what Kevin, the way you've taught, and we've heard from many others, it's a very, very safe investment. There might be pain if a note goes bad, but you're covered. You're going to more than cover yourself as far as making up for the inflation based upon the note rate. If you do it right.
Yeah. And that's something, you know what, even without inflation and recession and everything we're going to be talking about this series, that really should be something that you do regardless of the economy, is buying right. And I know, David, with your company Capstone, you offer notes, the availability from time to time. You even sell portions of notes that you personally own. And one thing I've always said to you is you take a very conservative approach to these notes, and you find plenty of deals, but you'll pass on the ones that don't meet a certain criteria that you set for yourself. Everybody has a different risk tolerance, but you've always been very disciplined about that. And I think that discipline becomes a habit that carries on. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, you've got to be disciplined. Now, maybe if you're younger, and most people are younger than myself, but if you haven't lived through several cycles, then you don't know. And it's all, it could be just Katie bar the door, let's just go. It doesn't matter if you bet on the come, so to speak, but you can't bet on the come. One of the investors at the meeting last night, they got 7 or 8 houses in flip. They said, I thought it was very interesting. They said, we're very active, we're making money. We only bet on where the market is today. We're not betting on where it might be tomorrow. It's too much risk. No different than in notes. You bet on where it is today. It is what it is. If it doesn't cut it, you move on.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important. It's so interesting right now, where we still have property values that are hanging in there. I mean, real estate values always come local, right? And in the note business, we have to talk about national, but nationally, because that's our marketplace. But it is localized. So there's going to be parts of the country where maybe you're listening to this podcast or watching this on YouTube and you're, well, in my area, this is happening, and somebody else, the properties are going down. In my area, they're going up. So we're all going to have that. But in general terms, across the U.S., we really haven't seen a property values going down. They're really maintaining value, which causes other problems, or potential problems, and we'll talk through those as well. But that's kind of an interesting thing. So note investors, once again, buying in today's market. I was talking to Dave. I had 2 of my student clients that I mentor. I had closing their first notes ever yesterday. Both of them happen to have it on the same day, and they're these investments that they got, and they're safe. They're double-digit returns, and it's backed by something that's worth, once again, about twice what they have in it. So property values do come down. They're in good shape. The other thing we looked at, going back to inflation and affordability, is the fact that the mortgage payment, along with taxes and insurance, so the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance on these deals, is about 1/3 of what rent is in the area. And that's another good combination for people listening to this and watching this. If you're out of the stock market, out of crypto, sitting on the sidelines, and you're looking for something that has safety and good returns, you've got to look into the note space. You can see some notes that Dave has on his website. I think you have some posted right now on Capstone, for example, that people could go and look at.
Yeah, Kevin, I have a couple on my website now. They've been sold, but the key component for what the viewer might want to look at is what was there and what the benchmarks were to make those notes good. They come and they go. If they're good notes, they are gone right away.
Right.
To your point, I am in the process of negotiating a couple of notes now. I will option them, if you will, and I'll broker them out. And they're going to be strong, and they'll be in Texas.
Yeah. And have those same kind of key ingredients of the payments are less than rent in the area, the property values are good, they owe less, so there's equity in the property, which gives motivation for people to stay and pay. They can't really, and that's the other thing these inflated prices are doing, is people are staying in their homes longer. Why? Because they can't sell and buy in the same neighborhood. It's
Right.
just, you can't. So a lot of these folks are really well seasoned type of notes, and but we are, by the way, everybody, going to see some problem notes. And in the note industry, that is also perfect for us because we are the problem solvers for non-performing notes. It's no longer banks. They've downsized their loss mitigation. They'd rather sell the notes than deal with foreclosures. Foreclosures are at historically low levels right now, and that's not going to change. That's written into the Dodd-Frank Act, and banks like it. So it's going to come down to mid-sized and individual investors who are going to be able to work with these folks who don't have the ability to make the payments and turn them around by restructuring loans, by getting them involved with government programs that can financially assist people. So there's a lot of opportunity, really, once again, in both sides of this. And that's what we saw spring out of really the last crash that we had. And I don't think neither one of us are ready to say we're going to face that same size crash, because it's different than the last crash for sure. But we do face a reality of recession. A lot of experts think that we're already in a recession, but the way the Fed looks at the numbers, you can't say we're in one right away. In fact, the National Bureau of Economic Research is the one who officially declares a recession. And that's based upon 2 consecutive quarters of decline in the real gross domestic product. So in the overall economy, and for those listening, I have a slide on that about the recession and the definition of what all that is, but I basically just defined it for you there. But it's a lasting more than a few months. So it's a couple of quarters of real income and employment goes down, production goes down, retail sales go down. It's just an overall very pessimistic marketplace, and everything just slows down. So when you have higher prices and a slowdown, that adds even more pressure on the marketplace and on borrowers.
Yeah, and Kevin, for everybody though, it's a look back. So you don't know until it's there, but you can get a feeling about what's going on. Typically your intuition is correct. So if you think it's there, run with your gut. If you don't think it's there, okay, run with your gut. But keep in mind, you always got to pay the price one way or another. But generically speaking, again, referring to last night, these investors are sensing, the old timers are sensing in just unbelievable opportunity coming up. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I think awareness is probably part one. And geez, just drive around. Do you see vacancies in little strip centers? Do you see vacancies in office buildings? And what about restaurants? Do they have less employees? Are they closing down? Those are the signs on the front line that we are there, and it has to be something that you're aware of, so you can get to the next phase of it, which is, well, what do we plan for? Again, protecting what we have, and then moving forward for potential growth. Because what we can see historically, and I really like this chart here that we're looking at once again. You can go to YouTube and see this if you're listening to the podcast, but it shows the economic expansion that happens after these down periods, because one really could make the argument, and I think it's accurate, that recessions are part of a cycle. It's a business cycle, so it's not like we can't ever have an economy without a recession. There's got to be a little bit of ebb and flow, because things get overheated and the market will start to correct itself. But the opportunities that are created out of it can be game changing. On the top of this chart, we have the economic expansion from the last crash. So if you recall, 2008, 2009 is when everything from all of the bad loans that were written for people for years before that, that just got to the point where people could no longer afford those payments. And the real estate bubble popped, really a real estate financing bubble, in my opinion. The market crashed. But since June 2009 through February 2020, we had 129 consecutive months of expansion. That's pretty powerful.
That's unheard of, obviously, by the chart.
Yeah, the 2000, the one before that, 1991 through 2001, both in March, the economic expansion after that market crash was 120 months. So it looks like, and you really can't tell on this chart, by the way, on the one hand, if you just look at months, it looks like, wow, this is a growing trend that the expansions are bigger every single time. Not really necessarily. You got to look at the dates over here, because we had expansions back in the 60s and the 80s and the 70s, 50s. So this chart shows all of those and what can happen. But the point being that every time there's been a recessionary period in the marketplace, it has rebounded. And it certainly looks like, at least for the last two, that expansion duration can go on for quite some time.
Correct. No, it's these cycles are very, very interesting. It's extremely interesting.
Yeah. Over 10 years, the last two. And when I got back into the note business, so I had been in more traditional real estate, doing the flips and things like that. And then I got into the note side again, but by doing hard money loans, lending to investors so that they could buy properties and such. I ran out of people to lend money to because the market was crashing. And I had to take a couple of properties back at that point in time. But that's really what drove me back into what we know as the note business today, which is buying existing performing and non-performing notes rather than originating them, although that's a part of the note business. But the big growth in the industry in the note business happened right during that expansion of 2009 to 2020. That's what put the note business on the map. And that's when you got into this side of things as well, right, Dave?
That's correct. Yeah, I was an REO guy. Well, building, developing, and then crashed, then REO guy, and then notes. But yes, but the irony is, Kevin, is that there's a parallel here. Mm-hmm. So what we were experiencing in 05, 6, 7 is now crash, lots of notes because of defaults. Mm-hmm. And here we go. So where we are now. So the debt expansion is very similar to, like I said, to the 5, 6, 7. Lots of notes are starting to build up, although they're not coming on the table yet in terms of foreclosures. It's the precursor there. The handwriting is on the wall. It's coming. Mm-hmm. Opportunity.
Here's another good parallel for you. Back in late 2008, there was a government program that came out to try to deal with the market crash. It was called the hardest hit funds. And you can Google search that, hardest hit funds, and you'll go right to the Treasury. I think it's the first link on there. And you can see that they put aside about $7 billion to help consumers stay in their home. In other words, avoid foreclosure. And how do you avoid foreclosure? Well, you have to catch up on your mortgage. So the government was giving people money to catch up their mortgage. That money was paid to note investors, regardless of what a note investor had paid for that note. In other words, if you bought a note, a non-performing note for $30,000, but the people owed $20,000 in an arrearage account to catch up, and they applied for this government program in these so-called hardest hit fund states, the state would pay you, the note investor, $20,000. And that happened within 90 days of buying the note. So you invested 30, you got 20,000 back. And guess what? Sometimes the government would go ahead and pay that person's next 12 months, 24 months of payments going forward. Government guaranteed money to help the consumer. And that program was fantastic for consumers, but the byproduct was during this expansion, there were people that were buying notes and growing. So talk about opportunity. That was one of the best, if not, no, I would say the best opportunity for a note investor to get involved in the note industry, because there was free money. Well, never free money from the government. You know, every taxpayers paid for it, got it. But that was money that was available, let me put it that way, for consumers to apply for. All they needed to do was hear that those programs were available. Now, here's the parallel. Within the last 6 months, so the beginning of this year, well, guess what? The government created another program. Now, they didn't call it Hardest Hit Funds. This time, they called it the Homeowner Financial Assistance Program. And it is remarkably similar to Hardest Hit Funds, but they're doing a better job of rolling it out. They're doing a better job of defining it, and they're holding states accountable to make sure that there's a phone number and a website for these people to get it. Now, in a case like this, every state in the United States got a part of the $10 billion that they put aside. So if you're thinking about the note business, if you're looking for these investment opportunities, I challenge you to find a safer place to invest your money right now. And then with this government program, this expansion period could really be great for you. So I know I went on a run there, Dave, but you had experience with those programs as well. But that's kind of a mind-blowing thing for investors, you know, looking to place some money right now.
Yeah, we talked about this, I think, in one of our last earlier videos. You know, I have a note now where the gentleman is going for the Hardest Hit Funds, and you know, by the time it's all said and done, out of a $13,000 little note that I bought, I'm going to have at best 5 into it. And then one of your students is doing the same thing right now. That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it's, and you know, the part of the feel-good part of the industry too, for those who are investors, but you like to think in terms of, I want to do in investing that ultimately helps people, and that, I mean, that's the very definition, because the states will spend all that money. It's been accounted for. It's been given to them by the Treasury. If they don't spend it, it goes back to the Treasury. Well, people are going to need help, and I've got about 4 people working on deals like that right now. You know, it is funny. It's just the consumers don't know about it, and that was a problem with the last program. But I think with this, at least the websites are there. You can print from there and give people the information. So again, I think with the troubles that we have, the black clouds gathering, if you will, you know, I certainly see that there's a silver lining on the other side. It comes down to positioning, and that's where I think where people who haven't gone through this, you know, need help. And you and I both watched some videos, pretty good ones, where people are talking about, why go through this alone, right?
Right.
I mean, one of the things you just did, you hadn't been to the real estate club in a long time. And you're going, you know what? You know, I'm going to look at the marketplace again and get a better feel for this. And guess what? You went to a group.
Right. You know, I have the model. I know how to do it. I just didn't want to do it. Now I am doing it.
Yeah.
But going to your point, one last, not to overkill, but on the Hardest Hit Funds. Mm-hmm. So let's say, Kevin, you buy a note, your payer goes and gets the Hardest Hit Funds and brings it current. They want to stay in the house. Mm-hmm. They're now brought current. That's a really strong note now. So if you want to sell that note, your note buyer is buying a good, solid product.
Oh yeah, 100%. You know, and you've got, imagine the pressure. You know, these people are facing potentially losing their home. You come in and buy their note. You know, they've been in distress. They haven't made a payment in 6 months. Some people have been in deferment programs still for 2 years right now. And they're coming out and going, what happened to the economy here? Inflation 7%, now 8.6%. Recession's coming. And how am I going to be able to catch up and make all these payments? And you come in and enlighten them to this new program, and they, they're thinking 24/7, are we going to lose our house, or do we have to move, or our kids going to be out of the school system in this area? They're going to lose their friends and all these sorts of thoughts. And all of a sudden this government program money comes in that you've educated them on, and that all goes away. So I think you're right. And in cases like that too, if further help is needed on our end, we're greatly positioned financially to modify that loan. Right. So if we have to temporarily lower the payments so that people can afford it until they get their feet back on the ground, we can do that. Because going back to my example, you might have paid 30 grand for the note, but you got 20, so you only got 10,000 in it. Certainly there's some things you can do, although you're not required, that you can do to help people out on that as well. So again, opportunities are going to come out of this.
Yep. It's a beautiful thing. It's a totally beautiful thing.
Yep.
So when it's all said and done, there's a bunch of crap, so to speak, out there, but it's going to be good coming out. So.
Yep, I believe so. And we're going to have to wrap it up for time wise on this one. Next one that we're going to put together for you, we're going to talk about what if real estate crashes, because certainly that's not making the headlines like inflation and recession and stagflation, but it's certainly a footnote where some people are going, ugh. Are we in a situation where real estate now crashes on top of this? Are we in the bubble of all bubbles, as people are starting to say here as well? We're going to talk about that in the next one and explain how that once again relates to you as a real estate or real estate note investor. And I think we're going to spend a lot of time on the second bullet point there, right?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, the skills and buying right. That's everything. When to buy, when to sell, how to buy.
Yeah, that never changes. That never changes. You got to know how to buy right on these things. What that buying right is in a price mechanism might change in the marketplaces, but the skill set is certainly still the same. And part of it, we'll talk more about it on the next one, but part of it is really just putting in the time, right? Reviewing deals.
It is. And I didn't get this deal. It's okay. There's another one around the corner. It doesn't matter. Buy it right. Make your money now, or if you don't buy it right, you're going to feel the pain later. Which would you rather have?
Yeah, and that's really how I spend my days today. Zoom on one-on-one sessions with people, just going through deals, looking at the paperwork, verifying information, that's not available, and identifying mistakes. Things that need to be corrected, overcome, certainly understanding what we can do. It all comes down to that skill set there. And that way you can insulate yourself, protect yourself from potential crashes. So we'll spend a lot more time on the next one for you there. So any final thoughts, Dave, before we close this one out?
3 letters, CYA.
Yeah, very good.
Fun, Kevin.
Yeah.
We'll
leave
to that session.
What's that?
I'm looking forward to that podcast. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, it sure is, and an important one as well. So thanks everybody for listening to the show. Once again, give us a nice rating there and a little heads up on YouTube, and please subscribe to the channel, and that will enable us to provide more and more of these podcasts for you. So on behalf of Dave and I, we look forward to talking to you once again real soon.
See you later.